Good morning, Stephen.
Now, I work in an environment where I come into I'm the first one in the office here in the morning. I get here at about 3:20 when no one else is here, but I'm actually here to do work. Now, if I came in here at midnight and somehow hurt myself or did something, what liability does an employer have if you're entering a workplace outside of work hours in an unauthorised manner, so to speak?
Yes, so it's a very good question. So the position is that an employer is liable for a worker's actions in the course of their employment. So it'll all come down to what is in the course of their employment means. So normally that means if you're at your workplace, then that's in the course of your employment, but there are certain exceptions to that. So I think in the case you've put, if you turned up at three in the morning to do your work, then definitely there'd be liability. But if you turned up drunk in the middle of the night in order to have a party with all of your friends who were not colleagues, then it probably would fall outside the liability. So it's all about why you're there and what you're there for.
So obviously we're now hearing that this payment to Brittany Higgins has been referred to the National Anti-Corruption Body. On the face of it, doesn't sound like it passes the pub test.
Yes, well, yeah, I follow that. It seems like a large compensation payout. I think in that case they were there, well, I mean, there's some conjecture about why they were there, but there's certainly an allegation that they were there to pick up work documents. And certainly Parliament House is a workplace, and it's primarily a workplace, not a place to entertain or to have parties. It's not a pub. But they were there to do something to do with work. So I think that's probably where the decision's coming from, in that they were there. That there were two colleagues there in the course of their employment because they were picking up documents. Generally, in the course of their employment is interpreted in a very broad way, perhaps too broad, where, you know, even if you had a few drinks and whatever, if you're there to do something connected to work, then there'll be liability.
And in the case of, there was obviously no court case around this compensation payout. It was a negotiation between the government and Brittany Higgins and her lawyers. Is that the way these things usually work? Would it usually be you as the lawyer representing the client negotiating directly with the employer in a case like this?
I would have expected this sort of thing would end up in court. Usually, particularly personal injury type claims, so claims for, you know, injuries to the person, which this would have been. There's a court application for the serious injury certificate and all this sort of stuff. There can be, you know, any legal case can always be settled, and I think this one was particularly sensitive, so perhaps it was settled more quickly than average. But you would expect this sort of thing to be determined by a judge.
All right, so this is as peculiar and unusual as most mug punters think it is.
Yes, look, it is unusual, and normally there's some court proceedings, particularly for a compensation payout of that size. But I would have thought it's so sensitive. I could see why the government would want it settled and moved on, and wouldn't want it before the courts.
Now, the other thing that, and this is in a broader term, not particularly about this, but some of the evidence that came out in this defamation trial was that there was taxation taken out of that payment. Is it compensation payments subject to taxation, are they?
No, my understanding is that they're generally not subject to tax, or they're not subject to very much tax. They're treated differently. Compensation payouts have a special status in law, particularly for personal injury, when you might need that money to pay medical bills or to pay for care or whatever it is. My understanding, I'm not an expert on tax law, but my understanding is they're treated differently. Certainly they're not treated like normal income.
Okay. Fascinating case. Alex, as always, you explained it in such layman's terms that the rest of us can understand it. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Stephen. It's a pleasure.
All the best. Alex Martin from Taurus Legal Management.